I was standing in the kitchen I'd scrubbed clean that morning, folding tiny socks that smelled of lavender detergent, when my son Michael walked in and said the words that would shatter everything I thought I knew about motherhood. "Mom, you're around too much," he said, not even looking at me as he grabbed a beer from the refrigerator. "Emily and I need space. It's time for you to find your own place." Just like that. No hesitation, no softness, no acknowledgement of the 5 years I'd spent in that smallest bedroom, raising his daughter while he built his career, cooking meals he barely thanked me for, making myself small so they could feel big. I'm 63 years old now, and I thought I'd learned all the ways a heart could break. I lost my husband David 7 years ago to cancer. Watched him fade away over 18 terrible months until there was nothing left but bones and love. That broke me in ways I'm still healing from. But what Michael did that evening, standing in the kitchen with such casual cruelty, that was a different kind of breaking. That was the kind that makes you question everything you've ever given, every sacrifice you thought meant something. Let me take you back a bit, so you can understand how I ended up in that moment, folding my granddaughter's tiny socks while my own son told me I wasn't wanted anymore. After David died, I was lost. Completely, utterly lost. We'd been married for 38 years, and suddenly half of me was just gone. The house we'd shared felt like a museum of memories I couldn't bear to walk through. Every room whispered his name. I'd find myself setting 2 places at the table, forgetting for just a moment that I was alone now. The grief was so heavy some mornings I couldn't get out of bed. Michael was living in a cramped apartment with Emily then, barely making ends meet on his new job at the tech company. They just found out Emily was pregnant with their first child. And I could see the stress in both their faces every time they visited. Michael looked so much like his father then. Same worry lines creasing his forehead, same way of rubbing the back of his neck when he was anxious. It made my heart ache. I had the life insurance money from David. Not a fortune, but enough. Enough to buy a modest 3-bedroom house in a good neighborhood with decent schools. I put it all in my name. The real estate agent suggested it, said it would make the purchase smoother, and I didn't think twice about it. Why would I? I was buying a home for my family. I told Michael and Emily it was their fresh start. "You're going to be parents," I said. "You need a real home, not that tiny apartment." The joy on their faces when I handed them the keys. I thought that was love reflected back at me. I thought I was doing what any mother would do, giving her children the foundation she and their father had worked so hard to build. The plan was simple in my mind. I'd take the smallest bedroom just temporarily, just until they got settled. I'd help with the baby, do some cooking and cleaning, be useful, be needed. Because that's what I'd always been, David's wife, Michael's mother, somebody's something. I didn't know how to just be Olivia anymore. Sitting alone in an empty house with nothing but memories and silence. Those first few months after we moved in, I convinced myself I'd made the right choice. Little Sophie was born in the spring, and she was perfect. 7 pounds of wrinkled pink perfection with David's nose and my eyes. I was there for all of it. The late-night feedings when Emily was too exhausted to move. The colic episodes that lasted for hours. The first smile, the first laugh, the first time she reached for me with those tiny starfish hands. I made myself useful. I woke up early to start breakfast before Michael left for work. I kept the house spotless, windows gleaming, floors you could eat off of, everything in its place. I did the grocery shopping, planned the meals, made sure there were always fresh flowers on the dining table, because Emily had mentioned once that she liked them. I took care of Sophie during the day so Emily could have time for herself, or meet with friends, or just sleep. I thought I was being helpful. I thought this was what families did, supported each other, shared the load, made space for each other's dreams. I was so proud watching Michael's career take off, seeing Emily relax into motherhood, watching Sophie grow. I told myself the cramped bedroom didn't matter, that the way Emily sometimes looked at me with irritation when I suggested a different way to do something was just new mother stress, that Michael's increasing distance was just him being busy and overwhelmed with work and fatherhood. But there were signs. Small ones at first, easy to explain away when you're desperate not to see them. Emily stopped asking my opinion about things. She used to want my input on everything: what color to paint Sophie's room, which pediatrician to choose, whether to start solid foods at 4 months or 6. Then gradually she just stopped asking. Started making decisions and informing me after the fact. Her tone making it clear my input wasn't needed or wanted. Michael stopped joining us for dinner most nights. Too much work. he'd say, taking his plate to his office. But I'd hear him in there on his computer watching videos, playing games. Not working. Just avoiding. They started closing doors. Their bedroom door always shut now. Sophie's door during nap time, even though I was the one who usually got her up. The office door, the bathroom door. Every door in that house seemed designed to keep me on the outside. The conversations stopped, including me. They'd be talking about weekend plans, about a movie they wanted to see, about a vacation they were planning, and when I'd try to join in or offer to watch Sophie, they'd exchange these looks. These quick, silent looks that said more than words ever could. Looks that said, "She doesn't understand that she's not invited." I tried to give them more space. I stayed in my room more, read books, did crossword puzzles, tried not to be so present. But that didn't help either, because then Emily would get frustrated that dinner wasn't ready, or that Sophie's laundry wasn't folded, or that the groceries hadn't been bought. I couldn't win. Too much me was suffocating. Too little me was neglectful. My friend Martha. I've known her since Michael was in elementary school. She tried to warn me. We met for coffee one Tuesday morning, and she looked at me with such concern. "Olivia," she said, stirring her latte slowly, choosing her words carefully, "are you happy living there? You seem diminished somehow." I laughed it off. "I'm just tired," I told her. "Keeping up with a toddler takes energy." But she persisted. "You gave them everything, honey. The house, your time, your whole life. What are you getting back?" I didn't have an answer. Or maybe I did, but I couldn't admit it. I was getting to be near my granddaughter. I was getting to feel needed. I was getting to avoid the crushing loneliness of living alone with David's ghost. That's what I was getting, and I'd convinced myself it was enough. Then came that evening in the kitchen. The evening everything changed. Michael had come home early from work, which was unusual. He walked past Sophie and me playing on the living room floor without so much saying hello to his daughter. I followed him to the kitchen a few minutes later with Sophie's laundry, and that's when he said it. "You're around too much. Emily and I need space. It's time for you to find your own place." I stood there, those tiny socks in my hands, and I couldn't speak. My mouth opened but nothing came out. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach, all the air gone from my lungs. "We've been talking about it for months," he continued, still not looking at me. "You're always here, always hovering, always in the way. We can't even have a private conversation in our own home." Our own home. He said it like I was a stranger. Like I hadn't bought this house with money his father and I had saved for 30 years. Like I hadn't given up my own space, my own life to make theirs easier. "But Sophie," I started. "We'll figure out childcare." He cut me off. "Emily's thinking about going back to work part-time anyway. We need to be a family, Mom. Just the three of us. Just the three of them." And what was I? What had I been all this time? I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to cry, to beg, to remind him of everything I'd done, every sacrifice I'd made. I wanted to ask him if this was how he planned to treat people who loved him, who gave him everything they had. I wanted to know when exactly I'd become such a burden that my own son couldn't stand having me in the house I'd bought for him. But I didn't do any of that. I just stood there, holding those tiny socks, feeling something inside me harden into a cold, clear resolve. Because in that moment, I realized something important. I realized that sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes sacrifice isn't honored. Sometimes the people you die for are the same people who'd toss you aside without a second thought. And I realized something else too. Something that would change everything in the days and weeks to come. That house was in my name. Every single document, every deed, every piece of paper that mattered. My name, Olivia Patterson. Not Michael's. Not Emily's. Mine. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my small bedroom, the one I'd painted a soft blue because Emily said she wanted the master bedroom to be sage green, and Sophie's room had to be pale yellow, and I stared at the ceiling until dawn crept through the curtains. My mind kept replaying Michael's words, but it wasn't just his voice I heard. It was every casual dismissal, every impatient sigh, every time Emily had rolled her eyes when I'd offered to help with something she hadn't asked me to do. The house made its usual nighttime sounds around me. The refrigerator humming in the kitchen where I'd spent countless hours preparing meals that were eaten without comment. The old furnace clicking on and off, the one I'd had serviced twice because Emily complained about cold drafts. Through the wall, I could hear Michael and Emily's muffled voices in their bedroom, probably discussing how relieved they'd be when I was finally gone. I wondered if they were planning what they'd do with my room once I left. Maybe turn it into Emily's craft space, or a home gym, or just storage for all the things they'd accumulated. When morning came, I got up like I always did. Made coffee, started breakfast, got Sophie's bottles ready. Emily came into the kitchen in her bathrobe, poured herself coffee without saying good morning, and took it back to her room. Michael left for work early without eating, grabbing a granola bar from the pantry. Neither of them looked at me. It was like I'd already disappeared. I fed Sophie her breakfast, made silly faces to get her to smile, and felt my heart crack a little wider with every giggle. She was almost 2 years old now, starting to form real words, her personality blooming like a flower in spring. I'd been there for every milestone, every single one. Her first word had been gamma, her version of grandma. Did that mean nothing to them? After I put Sophie down for her morning nap, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that went cold while I held it, and I let myself feel everything I'd been pushing down for months. Years maybe. The loneliness of living in a house full of people who treated me like furniture. The exhaustion of always trying to be useful, to prove my worth, to earn my place in a home I'd paid for. The humiliation of being told I was too much when I'd made myself as small as possible. But underneath all that pain, something else was rising. Something I hadn't felt in a very long time. It was anger, yes, but it was more than that. It was clarity. Cold, sharp, brilliant clarity. I'd spent 5 years tiptoeing around their feelings, their needs, their comfort. I'd given them everything. A house, my time, my labor, my complete devotion. And they'd taken it all as if it were their due. As if I owed them my entire existence simply because I was Michael's mother. As if the fact that I'd given birth to him, raised him, loved him through every stage of his life meant I was obligated to shrink myself down to nothing so he could feel bigger. Well, I was done shrinking. I pulled out my laptop, the one Michael had said I was too old to really understand, even though I'd been using computers since before he was born, and I started doing research. Real estate law, property rights, owner occupancy, title deeds. I read until my eyes burned and my tea had gone not just cold but room temperature. That house was mine. Legally, completely, undeniably mine. Michael and Emily had never contributed a single mortgage payment because there was no mortgage. I'd bought it outright with David's life insurance and our retirement savings. Their names weren't on any documents. They had no legal claim whatsoever. Around lunchtime, my phone rang. It was Martha. I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation last week, she said without preamble. Are you okay, Liv? You didn't seem okay. And just like that, with the kindness in her voice, the dam broke. I told her everything. Michael's words, the months of cold shoulders and closed doors, the way I'd been slowly erased from my own life. I cried while I talked and Martha let me, making soft sympathetic sounds but not interrupting, not trying to fix it, just listening the way only a real friend can. When I finally ran out of words, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," I admitted. But even as I said it, I knew that wasn't quite true. An idea was forming, something that scared me and thrilled me in equal measure. "You know you can't stay there," Martha said gently. "Not like this. Not with them treating you like an unwanted houseguest in a home you provided." "I know. So what are you going to do?" she asked again, more firmly this time. I took a breath. "The house is in my name, Martha. Only my name." There was a long pause. Then Martha, bless her, said exactly what I needed to hear. "Good. Then use that." We talked for another hour. Martha had gone through her own difficult situation years ago, when her ex-husband had tried to claim half of her inherited property in their divorce. She knew lawyers, knew real estate agents who worked quickly and discreetly, knew how these things could be handled. By the time we hung up, I had 3 phone numbers written on a notepad and a plan starting to form in my mind. That afternoon, while Sophie napped and Emily was out getting her nails done, I made the first call. Then the second. Then the third. The real estate agent, Patricia Chun, could meet me the next day. The lawyer, James Morrison, had an opening that Thursday. Everything was moving faster than I'd expected, and that scared me, but it also felt right. Like I'd been frozen for years and was finally thawing out, finally able to move again. I spent the rest of that day in a strange fog, going through the motions of dinner preparation while my mind raced ahead. Michael came home late again, took his plate to the office again. Emily ate in front of the television, scrolling through her phone. Sophie was the only one who seemed happy to see me, and even that joy was bittersweet now because I knew what was coming. I knew that whatever I decided to do, it would change her life too. And that thought kept me up for another sleepless night. The next morning, I told Emily I had a doctor's appointment. She barely looked up from her coffee. "Okay," she said. "I guess I'll have to watch Sophie then." "You'll have to watch your own daughter." That's what she said. Like it was a burden, like it was my job and she was being forced to cover my shift. I drove to Patricia Chin's office with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. She was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and a firm handshake. I showed her the deed, explained the situation. Not all of it, not the emotional parts, just the facts. House in my name. Son and daughter-in-law living there. Need to sell quickly. Patricia didn't ask questions I couldn't answer. She just nodded, made notes, and pulled up comps for the neighborhood. "In this market, if you're willing to accept a fair cash offer, I can have this sold in 2 weeks," she said. Maybe less. 2 weeks. My entire life packed up and moved out in 2 weeks. It felt impossible and yet absolutely necessary. "There's one thing," I said carefully. "The current occupants don't know I'm selling. They think it's their house." Patricia's eyebrows went up slightly, but her expression remained professional. "Do they have any legal claim to the property?" "None whatsoever. It's solely in my name. They've never paid anything toward it." "Then you have every legal right to sell it without their knowledge or consent," she said. "Though I'd recommend having a lawyer present when you inform them, just in case things get complicated." Complicated. That was one word for it. I signed the listing agreement right there, my hand only trembling a little. Patricia said she'd have professional photos taken that weekend when Michael and Emily took Sophie to the park like they did every Saturday morning. We'd stage a few showings during the weekday when they were at work or out. Everything could be handled discreetly until the sale was finalized. Walking back to my car, I felt lightheaded, almost drunk with what I'd just done. I'd just listed my son's house, the house he thought was his house, for sale without telling him. Part of me wanted to call Patricia back, to undo it all, to go back to being small and quiet and accommodating. But a stronger part of me, a part that sounded like David's voice in my head, said, "Good for you, Liv. It's about damn time." That evening, I cooked pot roast, Michael's favorite. I don't know why I did it. Maybe as a goodbye to the mother I'd been, the one who tried to buy love with perfectly cooked meals and clean houses. Michael ate it without comment, same as always. Emily picked at hers and mentioned she was thinking about going vegan. Sophie threw most of hers on the floor, which was normal for a toddler, and I cleaned it up like I'd done 1,000 times before. But this time, as I wiped mashed carrots off the floor, I wasn't thinking about how to make them happy. I was thinking about viewing appointments and closing dates and where I might want to live when this was all over. I was thinking about what it might feel like to wake up in a home where I wasn't just tolerated, but where I actually belonged. The rest of that week passed in a surreal blur. I met with James Morrison, the lawyer, who reviewed all my documents and confirmed what Patricia had said. The house was mine to sell, full stop. He drew up some additional paperwork, just to protect me in case Michael and Emily tried to claim some kind of tenancy rights or make trouble. He also quietly suggested I start documenting everything, taking photos of the house's condition, keeping records of any conversations, making sure I had proof of everything I'd paid for. People can get nasty when they feel entitled to something and then lose it, he warned me. Especially family. Cover yourself. His words stayed with me. People can get nasty. I'd never seen Michael be nasty, not really. But then again, I'd never taken anything away from him before. I'd only ever given. Patricia called on Thursday with good news. 3 viewings scheduled for the following week, and she already had 2 investors who'd expressed serious interest based on the photos alone. "This is going to move fast," she said. "Are you ready for that?" Was I ready? I thought about my little bedroom with the blue walls. About Sophie's laugh. About 5 years of making myself smaller and smaller until I'd nearly disappeared completely. About Michael's cold eyes when he told me I was around too much. "Yes," I said. "I'm ready." That night I started packing. Not obviously, just small things that wouldn't be noticed right away. My winter clothes since it was summer. Photo albums from my bedroom closet. Some of David's things I'd kept. His watch, his reading glasses, love letters he'd written me when we were young. I packed them in boxes labeled donations and loaded them into my car trunk when Michael and Emily were both asleep. Every item I packed felt like saying goodbye to something. To the grandmother who'd thought proximity to her family would be enough. To the mother who'd believed sacrifice equaled love. To the widow who'd been so afraid of being alone that she'd accepted crumbs and called them a feast. By Sunday night, I had 12 boxes packed and hidden in my car. And Patricia had called with an offer. A cash offer, full asking price, from an investor who wanted a quick close. 30 days if I needed it, but they could do it in 2 weeks if I preferred. I sat in my car in the grocery store parking lot. I told Emily I was running errands, and I stared at my phone with Patricia's message glowing on the screen. This was it. This was the moment where I had to decide whether I was really going to do this, or whether I was going to back down and accept being unwanted in the home I'd provided. I thought about David, about what he'd say if he could see me now, see how our son had treated me. David had been so proud of Michael, had such hopes for the kind of man he'd become. I wondered if he'd be disappointed now, or if he'd understand why I was doing this. I liked to think he'd understand. I liked to think he'd tell me the same thing Martha had. Use it. It's yours. Use it. I called Patricia back. Accept the offer, I said, and let's close in 2 weeks. The sale was scheduled to close in exactly 14 days, and I had managed to keep everything secret for 9 of them. 9 days of living in that house like a ghost haunting her own life, going through the motions while the wheels of my escape turned invisibly around me. 9 days of packing a little more each night after Michael and Emily went to bed, moving boxes to Martha's garage under cover of darkness, dismantling my life piece by piece while they remained oblivious. I should have known it was going too easy. On the 10th day, I came back from Martha's house. I'd been storing more boxes there, and we'd shared a pot of tea while discussing apartment listings, to find Emily standing in the driveway, her face flushed red, her phone clutched in her hand like a weapon. "Where have you been?" she demanded before I'd even gotten out of the car. My heart lurched, but I kept my voice steady. "Having tea with Martha. I told you this morning I was going out." "Someone came to the house today," Emily said, her voice shaking with barely controlled fury. "A couple. They said they were here to view the property. They had an appointment with a real estate agent." The earth tilted beneath my feet, but I forced myself to stay calm. Patricia had promised all viewings would be when the house was empty. This wasn't supposed to happen. "They must have had the wrong address," I said, moving to walk past her into the house. Emily stepped in front of me, blocking my path. "They had the right address, Olivia. They had our address and they said they'd seen the listing online. So I looked it up and guess what I found?" She shoved her phone in my face and there it was. My house, their house, the house they thought was theirs. Listed for sale on 3 different real estate websites. Professional photos of every room, including my small blue bedroom, taken during one of their Saturday park visits. "You want to explain this?" Emily's voice had gone cold now, dangerous. I looked at her, this woman who'd taken everything I'd offered and still found me lacking, and something inside me refused to bend anymore. "There's nothing to explain. I'm selling my house." "Your house?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "This is Michael's house. You gave it to him. You said it was ours." "I said you could live here," I corrected her quietly. "I never gave anyone anything. The deed is in my name, Emily. Only my name. Check the property records if you don't believe me." Her face went white, then red again. "Michael!" she screamed toward the house. "Michael, get out here." My son appeared in the doorway moments later, still in his work clothes. He took one look at Emily's face and his expression hardened. "What's going on?" "Your mother is selling the house," Emily spat out. "Our house. She's selling it out from under us." I watched Michael process this information, watched the confusion, then disbelief, then anger cross his face in waves. "Mom, what is she talking about?" "I'm selling the house," I said simply. "It's in my name and I have a buyer. The sale closes in 4 days." 4 days. Michael's voice cracked. "You can't. This is our home, Mom. We have a child. You can't just sell our house." "It's not your house," I said. And my voice was steady even though my heart was hammering. It was never your house. I bought it with your father's life insurance money. I let you live here. You asked me to leave, Michael. So I'm leaving, and I'm taking my property with me. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the birds seemed to have stopped singing. Michael and Emily stood there staring at me like I'd suddenly started speaking another language, like the nice, compliant, endlessly giving mother and mother-in-law they thought they knew had been replaced by someone unrecognizable. Michael found his voice first. You can't do this. We'll fight it. We've lived here for 5 years. We have rights. No, I said quietly. You don't. Check with a lawyer if you want. I already did. The house is mine. I can sell it whenever I choose, and I've chosen now. The new owners take possession on Friday. Friday. Emily's voice was a shriek now. That's 4 days away. Where are we supposed to go? What about Sophie? What about Sophie? The granddaughter I'd raised while they built their careers and their social lives. The child whose diapers I'd changed and whose tears I'd dried and whose first steps I'd witnessed because Emily had been at brunch with friends. Now suddenly they were concerned about Sophie's welfare? You'll figure it out, I said. You're both adults with good jobs. You'll land on your feet. I moved past them into the house, and this time Emily didn't try to stop me. I could hear them behind me, their voices rising in a frantic discussion, but I didn't turn around. I went straight to my bedroom and closed the door, leaning against it while my whole body shook. It was done now. They knew. No going back. The next 3 days were a special kind of hell. Michael tried everything. First came the guilt. He knocked on my bedroom door that night, his voice soft and pleading. Mom, please let's talk about this. I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings. I didn't mean it the way it came out. We don't really want you to leave. Can't we work something out? I didn't open the door. The sale is final, Michael. I've already accepted the offer. Then came the anger. The next morning he was screaming through the door about betrayal, about how he trusted me, about what kind of mother does this to her own son. Emily joined in, her voice shrill, saying I was vindictive and cruel and that I'd never see Sophie again if I went through with this. That threat cut deep, but I'd expected it. James Morrison had warned me it might come to that. Grandparents have very limited rights, he told me. If they want to cut you off, they probably can. You need to be prepared for that possibility. I'd cried in his office when he said it, but I'd also known, even through the tears, that staying wasn't an option anymore. That sacrificing my dignity and my future just to maintain access to my granddaughter wasn't love. It was hostage negotiation. On the second day after they found out, I discovered Emily in my bedroom, going through my drawers. What are you doing? I demanded. She looked up, not even having the grace to look ashamed. Looking for the deed. You must have it somewhere. We're going to challenge this sale. Get out of my room, I said, my voice shaking with fury. The deed is with my lawyer, and you have no right to be in here. No right. She laughed bitterly. We have no rights? We've lived here for 5 years, Olivia. We've made this house a home. We've invested in it. You've invested nothing, I said flatly. I paid for everything. The house, the utilities, the groceries, the furniture. Every single thing. You've contributed exactly nothing except making me feel unwelcome in my own home. Emily's face twisted. We let you live here. We let you be part of Sophie's life. That's worth something. The audacity of it took my breath away. They let me live in the house I bought. They let me be part of my granddaughter's life. As if these were gifts they'd bestowed rather than things I'd earned. Things I'd paid for with money and time and endless sacrifice. Get out, I repeated, and something in my voice must have finally gotten through because Emily left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. That afternoon Martha called. Liv, I just got a very strange call from someone claiming to be your son. He said you were incompetent and suffering from dementia, and that I was taking advantage of you. He wanted to know if you'd been storing boxes at my house. My blood went cold. What did you tell him? I told him that you were sharper than both of us put together, that you were making your own decisions, and that he should be ashamed of himself, Martha said firmly. But Liv, if he's calling me, who else is he calling? She was right to worry. Over the next 24 hours, I discovered just how desperate Michael and Emily had become. Patricia called first. "Mrs. Patterson, I received a call from your son. He's claiming you don't have the mental capacity to sell the house, and that he has power of attorney. Do you know anything about this?" "I've never signed a power of attorney to anyone," I said immediately. "My lawyer has all my paperwork." "This is a lie." "I figured as much," Patricia said. "But I wanted to give you a heads up." He sounded pretty determined. Then James Morrison called. "Olivia, we have a problem. Someone filed paperwork with the county claiming to have power of attorney over your affairs. It's slowing down the title transfer. Can they do that?" "I never signed anything." "No, they can't, and we'll get it straightened out. But it's going to take a day or two to prove the power of attorney is fraudulent. The closing might have to be pushed back." My hands were shaking when I hung up. Michael and Emily had forged documents. They'd actually forged legal documents to try to stop me from selling my own house. My own son, the boy I'd raised to know right from wrong, was committing fraud to take what was mine. That evening, I was in the kitchen making myself some soup. I'd barely eaten in days when Emily came in with her laptop. She set it down on the counter and turned it toward me. "Look at this," she demanded. On the screen was an application for a home equity line of credit. The property address was this house. And there, forged at the bottom, was my signature. "We submitted this last week," Emily said, her voice matter of fact. "Before we knew you were selling. It should be approved any day now. That's going to complicate your sale, isn't it?" I stared at the screen, at my forged signature, at the casual criminality of what they'd done. They tried to take out a loan against my property without my knowledge or consent. They'd forged my signature on a legal document. And Emily was standing here telling me about it like it was a clever chess move, not a felony. "You forged my signature," I said slowly, "on a financial document. That's fraud, Emily. That's a crime." She shrugged. "Prove it. We live here. We've lived here for 5 years. Any judge will see that we have an interest in this property, that you gave it to us, and that you're only trying to sell it now because you're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking perfectly clearly," I said. "Clearer than I have in years." "Are you?" Emily leaned forward. "Because I've been documenting things, Olivia. All your forgetfulness, your confusion, the way you repeat yourself. I've been keeping a journal. And I've talked to Sophie's pediatrician about my concerns regarding your mental state around our daughter." The soup pot started to boil over behind me, hissing as it hit the burner, but I couldn't move. I understood now what they were building. A case. A narrative. That I was incompetent, that I needed supervision, that they were the responsible ones trying to protect me from my own poor judgment. "You're going to lose everything if you fight us," Emily continued. "The house sale will fall through. You'll have legal fees. We'll make sure everyone knows you're not fit to manage your own affairs. Is that really what you want?" I turned off the stove, wiped up the spilled soup with a dishcloth, took several deep breaths. Then I looked at Emily, really looked at her, and I saw what I should have seen months or years ago. I saw someone who had never viewed me as a person, only as a resource to be exploited and then discarded when no longer useful. "Get out of my kitchen," I said quietly. "This isn't your kitchen," Emily shot back. "This is our house, and you're just too stubborn and senile to accept it. Get out." She grabbed her laptop and left, and I stood there in the kitchen I'd cleaned 1,000 times, and I did something I hadn't done in 5 years. I called the police. The officer who came was young, probably Michael's age, and he listened patiently while I explained about the forged power of attorney and the fraudulent loan application. He took notes, looked sympathetic, but ultimately said what I'd feared he'd say. "Ma'am, these are civil matters. You'll need to handle them through your lawyer. If you can prove the signatures were forged, you can press charges, but we can't do anything tonight. They're trying to steal my house," I said, and I hated how my voice shook. "I understand, and I'm sorry, but without clear evidence of immediate criminal activity, this isn't something we can act on. Document everything. Keep records. Talk to your lawyer." After he left, I sat in the darkening kitchen and felt the weight of what I was up against. Michael and Emily weren't just going to let me walk away. They were going to fight with everything they had: lies, forgery, character assassination, whatever it took. Because to them, I'd committed the ultimate sin. I'd stopped being useful and started standing up for myself. I called James Morrison at home, not caring that it was after 8 in the evening. They forged documents, I told him. A power of attorney and a loan application. They're building a case that I'm incompetent. What do I do? There was a long pause. Then James said, "We fight back. Harder and smarter. Can you come to my office first thing tomorrow morning?" "Yes." "Good. Bring every document you have. Every deed, every bill, every bank statement proving you bought and paid for that house. We're going to bury them in evidence, and we're going to make sure that sale closes on time." I hung up and sat in the dark a little longer. From upstairs, I could hear Sophie crying, probably overtired, and Emily's sharp voice telling her to go to sleep. A few months ago, I would have gone up there. I would have rocked Sophie, sung to her, soothed her until she drifted off, but I wasn't welcome to do that anymore. I'd been told quite clearly that I was around too much. So I sat in the dark and listened to my granddaughter cry, and I hardened my heart just a little bit more, because I was going to need that hardness to survive what was coming. I was going to need to be strong in ways I'd never been before, and I couldn't afford to let love make me weak again. The war had begun, and I intended to win. I didn't sleep at all that night. I lay in my blue bedroom with my door locked. I'd installed the lock myself after finding Emily going through my things, and I listened to the house settle around me. Every creak and groan felt ominous now, like the building itself was protesting what was about to happen. Around 3 in the morning, I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my door. They stopped right there, just on the other side, and stayed for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Then they moved away, and I heard Michael and Emily's door close softly. They were planning something. I could feel it. At dawn, I got up and got ready like I was preparing for battle. I'd laid out my clothes the night before. A navy blue suit David had always said made me look professional and confident. I put on the pearl earrings he'd given me for our 20th anniversary. I did my hair and makeup carefully, wanting to look like exactly what I was. A competent, clear-headed woman who knew her own mind. Not the confused, incompetent elderly person Michael and Emily were trying to paint me as. I was backing out of the driveway at 7 when Michael came running out of the house, still in his pajamas. He stood behind my car, forcing me to stop. "Mom, please," he said through the window. "We need to talk about this. You can't just leave without talking to us." "I have an appointment with my lawyer," I said. "Move, please." "Your lawyer?" His face changed, hardened. "You don't need a lawyer, Mom. You need help. Emily and I have been talking, and we think you should see someone. A doctor. We're worried about you." There it was. The next move in their strategy. They were going to try to have me declared incompetent. "I'm perfectly fine, Michael. Move away from the car." "You're not fine. You're making irrational decisions. Selling your home where your family lives, where your granddaughter lives. That's not normal behavior, Mom. That's a sign that something's wrong." I looked at my son through the windshield. This man I'd carried for 9 months, nursed through every childhood illness, cheered for at every soccer game and school play. This man who looked so much like his father but lacked every ounce of his father's integrity. And I felt something inside me finally completely break. Not my resolve, that was stronger than ever. But whatever remaining hope I'd had that Michael might remember who I was, what I'd sacrificed, how much I'd loved him. That hope died right there in the driveway as he used my own supposed mental incompetence as a weapon against me. "Get out of my way, Michael," I said coldly, "or I'll call the police and tell them you're preventing me from leaving." He moved. But as I drove away, I could see him in the rearview mirror, his phone already out, probably calling Emily, probably setting their next trap. James Morrison's office was downtown, in an old building that still had some dignity to it. His secretary brought me coffee and treated me with such normal kindness that I almost cried. Strange what breaks you sometimes. Not the big betrayals but the small mercies that remind you how long you've gone without them. James came out of his office looking grim. "We have a situation," he said. "Sit down." In his office, he spread documents across his desk like evidence at a crime scene. "Your son and daughter-in-law filed 3 separate actions yesterday afternoon. First, a petition claiming you're mentally incompetent and requesting guardianship. Second, an emergency injunction to stop the house sale. Third, a police report claiming you've stolen furniture and belongings from the house." I felt the room tilt. Stolen? From my own house. They're claiming the furniture belongs to them, that you're removing their property. It's nonsense, but it's designed to create chaos and delay the sale. He leaned forward. Olivia, I need you to be completely honest with me. Do you have any medical conditions they could use? Any memory problems, confusion? Anything that could support their claims? No, I said firmly. I had a complete physical 2 months ago. My doctor said I'm healthy as a horse for 63. I can get records. Good. We'll need those. We'll also need statements from friends, character witnesses. Can you get those? Martha will testify for me. And my book club friends. My pastor. Anyone who actually knows me. James nodded, making notes. Here's where we stand. The guardianship petition is scheduled for a hearing tomorrow. The judge will want to hear medical evidence. The injunction hearing is this afternoon at 2. We need to prove you have clear title, mental capacity, and the right to sell. The police report is the easiest. We have receipts for everything you purchased. But they're throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. Will the sale still close on Friday? That was all I cared about now. Getting out. Getting free. If we win the injunction hearing today, yes. If not. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. We spent the next 3 hours preparing. James requested my medical records. I called my doctor's office and begged them to expedite a letter confirming my mental competency. I called Martha, who promised to be at the courthouse by 2. I went through every receipt, every bank statement, every piece of paper that proved I bought and paid for everything in that house. At 1:30 my phone rang. It was Patricia. Olivia, I'm at the house doing a pre-closing walkthrough and there's a problem. A lot of the furniture is gone. The living room is almost empty. The dining table is missing. They're claiming you removed their belongings. My heart sank. They moved their own furniture and are saying I stole it. That's what I figured. Do you have proof of purchase for the missing items? Yes. Everything. I kept all the receipts. Good. Bring them to the courthouse. We're going to need them. The injunction hearing was held in a small courtroom that smelled of old wood and anxiety. Michael and Emily were already there with their lawyer, a sharp-faced man in an expensive suit who looked like he specialized in making honest people seem like criminals. They dressed carefully too, Emily in a conservative dress, Michael in a suit, both of them looking like concerned, responsible adults dealing with a difficult elderly relative. Judge Patricia Hawthorne was in her 50s, with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She listened to both sides present their arguments, her face impassive. Michael's lawyer went first, painting a picture of a confused elderly woman making irrational decisions because of grief and age. Mrs. Patterson's son and his family have lived in this house for 5 years, he said smoothly. They've built their lives there, raised a child there. Mrs. Patterson recently suffered the loss of her husband and has shown increasing signs of mental decline. This sudden decision to sell the family home is clearly a cry for help, not a rational choice. Then it was James's turn. He was methodical and devastating. He presented the deed showing sole ownership. Bank statements proving I'd paid for everything. My recent medical records including a note from my doctor stating I showed no signs of cognitive decline. Receipts for every stick of furniture in that house. And then, beautifully, he presented the forged power of attorney documents and the fraudulent loan application. Your Honor, James said, his voice calm but forceful, this is not a case of an elderly woman needing protection. This is a case of a competent property owner exercising her legal rights, and her adult son attempting fraud and forgery to prevent it. Mrs. Patterson has every right to sell her property. The respondents have no legal claim whatsoever. The judge looked at Michael and Emily. Did you forge these documents? She asked directly. Their lawyer jumped in. Your Honor, my clients were acting out of concern. I asked them, not you. The judge's voice was sharp. Mr. Patterson, did you forge a power of attorney document bearing your mother's signature? Michael's face was red. We thought she wasn't capable of making decisions. We were trying to protect her. That's not what I asked. Did you forge the document? Yes or no? A long, terrible pause. Then, yes. The judge's expression didn't change, but I saw her hands tighten on her desk. And Mrs. Patterson, did you attempt to take out a home equity loan on property you don't own? Emily looked at her lawyer, who shook his head minutely. But the judge was waiting. "We live there," Emily said, her voice defensive. "We have rights." "You have residency," the judge corrected. "You don't have ownership. There's a significant difference." She looked at the papers in front of her for a long moment. Then she looked up. "The injunction is denied. Mrs. Patterson has clear title, mental capacity, and the legal right to sell her property. The sale will proceed as scheduled. Furthermore, I'm referring the forged power of attorney to the district attorney's office for investigation. This hearing is adjourned." The gavel came down, and just like that it was over. Michael and Emily sat frozen in their seats while James and I gathered our papers. As we walked past them toward the door, Michael reached out and grabbed my arm. "Mom, please. Don't do this. We're sorry. We'll do better. Just give us another chance." I looked down at his hand on my arm, then up at his face. He looked young suddenly, like the little boy who used to have nightmares and crawl into bed with David and me for comfort. For just a moment I wavered. For just a moment I thought about all the years of love, all the memories, all the reasons a mother forgives her child anything. Then I remembered standing in the kitchen with Sophie's socks in my hands, while he told me I was around too much. I remembered Emily going through my drawers. I remembered the forged documents and the fraudulent loan and the police report accusing me of theft. I remembered 5 years of being made to feel like an intruder in the home I'd provided. "Let go of my arm, Michael," I said quietly. He did, and we left. Outside the courthouse, Martha was waiting. She hugged me tight, and I let myself lean into her strength for just a moment before pulling back. "It's not over yet," I said. "I still have to get through the next 2 days." I was right to worry. That evening, when I returned to the house to continue packing, I found that Emily had changed the locks. I stood on the porch, my key useless in my hand, and I felt a cold fury rise in me. My house. My property. And she'd locked me out of it. I called James immediately. He called the police. 2 officers showed up, and I had to show them the deed, prove that I owned the house, explain that I was being illegally prevented from entering my own property. It took an hour, but eventually one of the officers made Emily open the door. "This is harassment," Emily hissed at me as I walked past her. "You're harassing us, forcing us out of our home with a toddler." The officer heard her. "Ma'am, this is her property. You're the one who changed the locks illegally. I suggest you cooperate, or I'll have to arrest you for unlawful exclusion." Emily went pale and silent. I spent that night packing everything I could fit into boxes. My dishes, my linens, my books. Every photograph, every keepsake, every item that was mine. Martha came over with her truck, and we loaded boxes until midnight. Michael and Emily stayed in their room with the door closed, but I could hear them arguing, their voices rising and falling in waves of panic and blame. Around 11, Sophie started crying. She cried, and neither of them went to her. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. I knocked on their door. "Sophie needs you," I said through the wood. "You go," Emily shouted back. "You're so concerned about her, you deal with her." But I couldn't. That was the trap. If I went in there, if I comforted Sophie, they'd use it as evidence that they needed me, that I was essential to their childcare, that removing me would harm the child. So I stood in the hallway and listened to my granddaughter cry herself to sleep, and I hated Michael and Emily for putting all of us in this position. The next day was the guardianship hearing. I sat in another courtroom while a court-appointed psychiatrist testified that he'd evaluated me that morning and found me completely competent. My doctor testified by video call that I showed no signs of dementia or cognitive decline. Martha testified about our friendship, about how sharp and clear I'd always been. My pastor testified. 3 women from my book club testified. Michael and Emily's lawyer tried, but he had nothing. No medical evidence. No witnesses to any actual incompetence. Just vague claims about forgetfulness and confusion that no one could substantiate. The judge denied the guardianship petition. "Mrs. Patterson is clearly of sound mind," she said. "This petition appears to be an attempt to control her assets rather than a genuine concern for her welfare." Denied. 2 victories. 1 day left. That night, I slept at Martha's house. I couldn't face another night in that blue bedroom. Another night of hostility and hatred seeping through the walls. Martha made up her guest room for me, gave me chamomile tea, and sat with me while I cried. Not from sadness anymore, but from exhaustion and stress and the sheer weight of fighting my own family. Almost there, Martha kept saying. Just one more day, Liv. Just one more day. Friday morning dawned clear and bright. The closing was scheduled for 10 a.m. I dressed in my navy suit again, put on my pearls again, and drove to the title company with James. Patricia was already there, looking harried. "The buyers are here and ready," she said. "But I should warn you, your son and daughter-in-law are in the parking lot. They're not giving up." I could see them through the window. Michael pacing, his phone pressed to his ear. Emily holding Sophie, who was squirming and fussing. They looked frantic, desperate. "Let's get this done," I said. The closing took 30 minutes. Papers to sign, documents to initial, keys to hand over. The buyers were a nice couple in their 30s, excited about their first investment property. They had no idea about the drama that had led to this moment, and I didn't tell them. I just signed and signed and signed, my hand steady, my mind clear. And then it was done. The house was sold. The money was in my account. I was free. We walked outside into the sunshine, and that's when Michael ran over. "Mom, stop. You can't do this. That's our home. Sophie's home. Where are we supposed to go?" "That's not my problem anymore," I said, and kept walking toward my car. Emily was right behind him, tears streaming down her face, Sophie on her hip. "Please, Olivia. Please. We'll pay you back. We'll pay rent. Whatever you want. Just give us time." I stopped and turned to look at them one last time. Michael, my son, who'd told me I was around too much. Emily, who'd forged my signature and called me incompetent. Sophie, my granddaughter, who I loved more than they would ever understand. "You had 5 years," I said quietly. "You had 5 years of me giving you everything. My home, my time, my labor, my love. You took it all and told me it wasn't enough, that I was too much, that you wanted me gone. Well, I'm gone now. You got exactly what you asked for." "We didn't mean it like that," Michael said desperately. "We just needed some space, some boundaries. We didn't mean for you to leave forever." "You meant it," I said. "Maybe you didn't think through the consequences, but you meant it. And now you get to live with what you chose." I got in my car and drove away. In the rearview mirror, I could see them standing in the parking lot of the title company, next to the car they'd have to sleep in that night because they no longer had a home. I could see Emily clutching Sophie, Michael's shoulders slumping in defeat, and I felt no guilt, no regret, no urge to turn around and fix it for them. I felt free. The apartment I'd rented was small, just a one-bedroom on the 3rd floor of an older building with good bones and better light. Martha had helped me find it 2 weeks earlier, during one of our secret planning sessions. It had hardwood floors that creaked pleasantly when you walked, a kitchen window that looked out over a garden courtyard, and absolutely no memories attached to it whatsoever. That first night, I sat on the floor surrounded by boxes. Martha and I had moved the essentials in that afternoon, and I ate Chinese takeout straight from the carton. No cooking for anyone else. No cleaning up after a family meal where no one thanked me. No tiptoeing around other people's moods and schedules. Just me, some lo mein, and the profound silence of a space that was entirely my own. I should have felt triumphant. I won after all. I'd outsmarted them, outmaneuvered them, stood my ground and reclaimed my life. But sitting there on the floor as the spring evening light faded through my new windows, what I mostly felt was tired. Bone deep, soul tired in a way that had nothing to do with the physical labor of moving, and everything to do with the emotional cost of the past 2 weeks. I'd lost my son. That was the truth I had to face now, in the quiet of my empty apartment. Michael had called 17 times that day. 17 calls I hadn't answered. He'd left voicemails that ranged from angry to pleading to coldly informative. They'd found a motel for the night. How did I feel about making my granddaughter sleep in a motel? Was I happy now? Each message was a small knife, but I'd learned to let them glance off the armor I'd built. Emily had sent texts. Long vitriolic texts calling me every terrible name she could think of. Selfish. Vindictive. Heartless. A terrible mother and grandmother. She hoped I was proud of myself for destroying their family. She hoped I could sleep at night knowing what I'd done. I could sleep as it turned out. That first night in my new apartment, I slept for 11 hours straight, the dreamless sleep of someone who'd been carrying a crushing weight and had finally set it down. When I woke up the next morning Saturday, the sun was streaming through windows I could leave open without worrying about someone else's preference for air conditioning. I made coffee in my little kitchen and drank it slowly, sitting at the small table Martha had helped me pick out at a thrift store. It was just big enough for one person. Perfect. Martha called around 10. How are you feeling? Strange, I admitted. Light but strange. Like I've forgotten something important, but can't remember what. You've forgotten how to live for other people, Martha said gently. That's going to feel strange for a while. But Liv, you're going to be okay. Better than okay. Michael keeps calling. Don't answer. Not yet. Give yourself time. He says they're staying in a motel. That Sophie is confused and crying. There was a pause. Liv, they have jobs. They have money. They could have saved up a deposit for an apartment any time in the last 5 years, but they didn't because they were living rent-free in your house. This situation is not your fault, and it's not your responsibility to fix. I knew she was right, but the mother in me, the part that had been programmed for 34 years to fix Michael's problems, to smooth his path, to sacrifice my own comfort for his, that part was screaming at me to call him back, to offer to help, to make it all better somehow. Come have lunch with me, Martha said. You shouldn't be alone today. But I wanted to be alone. That was the revelation that had hit me somewhere in the night. I wanted to be alone. For 5 years, I'd been surrounded by people who didn't want me there. Before that, I'd been David's wife, Michael's mother, defined entirely by my relationships to other people. I couldn't remember the last time I'd just been Olivia. Just me, with no one else's needs or wants or judgments crowding in. Thank you, I told Martha. But I think I need to sit with this for a bit. Is that okay? More than okay, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Call me if you need anything. I spent that day unpacking boxes and arranging my small space. Every item I pulled out was something I'd chosen, something I'd paid for, something that was mine alone. The blue mixing bowl I bought 40 years ago when David and I were first married. The quilt my mother had made me before she died. Books I'd collected over a lifetime, their spines cracked from rereading. Photographs of the people I'd loved, before love became complicated and painful. I hung David's picture in the bedroom, a photo from our 20th anniversary, before the cancer, when his eyes still crinkled with joy and his laugh came easily. I think you'd understand, I told the photo. I think you'd tell me I did the right thing. The photo didn't answer, but I felt something ease in my chest anyway. Sunday, I went to church for the first time in months. I'd stopped going while living with Michael and Emily because Sunday mornings had become their family time, their time to sleep in or go to brunch, and they'd made it clear my presence wasn't required. My pastor, Reverend Linda, spotted me in the back pew and her whole face lit up. After the service, she pulled me aside. Olivia, I've been worried about you. Are you all right? I almost said yes automatically, the way you do when you've been trained to smooth things over and not make a fuss. But then I stopped myself. No, I said honestly. But I'm working on it. She listened while I gave her the abbreviated version, the house, the betrayal, the fight, the sale. She didn't offer platitudes or tell me everything happens for a reason. She just said, that took tremendous courage. I'm proud of you. Those words broke something loose in me that had been holding firm all weekend. I cried in the church parking lot while Reverend Linda held my hand, and when I was done I felt lighter somehow, cleaner. We have a women's group that meets Tuesday evenings, she said. Different women, different ages, just talking about life. You might like it. I promised to think about it and I meant it. Monday morning I had to deal with the practical matters. I went to the bank and moved the money from the house sale into a new account. One Michael didn't know about, couldn't access, couldn't even imagine taking from me. It was more money than I'd ever had at once. Enough to live modestly for years if I was careful. Enough to breathe, to choose, to build a life that was actually mine. I called my old employer, the library where I'd worked before David got sick. Any chance you need a part-time volunteer? I asked the director. I have some free time now. She laughed with delight. Olivia Patterson, we would love to have you back. When can you start? How about tomorrow? That afternoon, I walked around my new neighborhood. Really walked, paying attention, noticing things. There was a community center 2 blocks away with a flyer advertising pottery classes. A small cafe with tables outside where people sat reading newspapers and sipping coffee. A A park with walking trails and benches under old oak trees. A used bookstore with a cat sleeping in the window. I went into the cafe and ordered a latte, something I never did when I was managing the household budget and trying to make every dollar stretch to cover 3 adults and a child. I sat at one of those outdoor tables and watched people walk by, and I felt anonymous in the best possible way. No one knew me here. No one knew my story. I was just another woman drinking coffee on a Monday afternoon, and that felt like a gift. My phone rang. Michael again. I stared at it for a long moment, then declined the call. I wasn't ready yet. Maybe I'd never be ready. That was a thought I'd been avoiding, but sitting there in the spring sunshine with my expensive coffee, I let myself consider it fully. Maybe Michael and I were done. Maybe some breaks couldn't be repaired, shouldn't be repaired. Maybe the cost of maintaining that relationship was higher than I was willing to pay anymore. The thought hurt, but it didn't destroy me. That was progress. Tuesday evening, I went to the women's group at church. There were 8 of us. Ages ranging from mid-30s to late 70s, backgrounds all different, but something in common that was hard to name. A certain wariness, maybe. A certain strength that comes from surviving things you didn't think you could survive. When it was my turn to introduce myself, I kept it simple. I'm Olivia. I recently moved into the area. I'm 63, widowed, and trying to figure out who I am when I'm not taking care of someone else. A woman across the circle, maybe 40 with kind eyes, nodded slowly. That's a harder question than it sounds like, isn't it? Much harder, I agreed. We talked for 2 hours about everything and nothing. Someone's difficult sister. Someone else's job stress. A book one woman was reading. Plans for summer gardens. Normal things, surface things, but underneath it was connection. Real connection, not the performative family connection I've been clinging to for 5 years. These women didn't need me for anything. They didn't want anything from me. They just welcomed me into their circle and made space. When I got home that night, there was a letter taped to my apartment door. My heart sank. I'd given Michael and Emily my new address because legally I had to for mail forwarding purposes. I took it inside and sat down before opening it, bracing myself for more accusations and anger. But it wasn't from Michael. It was from Sophie's daycare, forwarded from the old house. A notice about the upcoming end-of-year program, asking if family members could attend. I sat holding that letter for a long time, looking at the date. The program was next Friday. Sophie would be singing songs probably, maybe showing off an art project. She'd be looking into the audience for familiar faces, the way toddlers do, seeking approval and love. I wouldn't be there. Couldn't be there. The price of my freedom was Sophie, and that was a cost I'd known I'd have to pay but hadn't fully felt until this moment. I let myself cry about it. Hard, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere deep and ancient, the place where mothers and grandmothers have mourned lost children since the beginning of time. I cried for Sophie, who wouldn't understand why Gamma wasn't there anymore. I cried for the relationship we'd had, the bond I'd thought was unbreakable. I cried for all the milestones I'd miss. First day of kindergarten, lost teeth, school plays, graduation. But when the crying was done, I didn't call Michael. I didn't offer to come to the program. I folded the letter carefully, put it in a box with other memories I wasn't ready to throw away but couldn't keep looking at, and I moved forward. Wednesday, I started volunteering at the library. Felt like coming home. The smell of books, the quiet, purposeful atmosphere, the joy of helping someone find exactly the story they needed. Mrs. Chan, the director, put me at the information desk where I could use my decades of reading to recommend books to patrons. A young mother came in with a fussy toddler about Sophie's age. I need something to read, she said tiredly. Something that's not about being a mom. Something that will help me remember I'm still a person. I found her 3 books, including one that had gotten me through the hardest months after David died. These helped me, I told her, when I needed to remember who I was. She looked at me, really looked, and something passed between us. Understanding maybe, the recognition that we were both works in progress, both trying to be more than the roles other people had assigned us. Thank you, she said, and meant it. Thursday, I signed up for the pottery class at the community center. I'd always wanted to try pottery but had never had time. Too busy cooking and cleaning and childcare and being useful to everyone except myself. The first class was that evening, and I showed up nervous, wearing old clothes I didn't mind ruining, feeling completely out of my depth. The instructor was a woman in her 50s named Joan with clay under her fingernails and a laugh that filled the room. "Welcome," she said to the group of us, 7 students, all ages, all looking equally nervous. "This is a judgment-free zone. Clay doesn't care if you're good at it. Clay just wants you to play." I sat at the wheel with a lump of cold, wet clay and tried to center it the way Joan demonstrated. It was harder than it looked. The clay wobbled and spun off center, water splashing, my hands unsure. I made a mess. Everyone made a mess. And somewhere in the middle of the mess and the laughter and the complete lack of perfection required, something in me started to heal. "Don't worry about making something useful," Joan said, stopping by my wheel. "Your first pieces probably won't be. Just feel the clay. Learn its language. The useful stuff comes later." I didn't need useful right now. I'd been useful for 63 years. What I needed was this messy and imperfect and just for me. Friday morning, Michael called again. This time I answered. "Mom." His voice was rough, exhausted. "We need to talk." "I'm listening," I said, keeping my own voice neutral. "We found an apartment. 1 bedroom for now until we can save up for something bigger. Emily's going back to work full-time. We're putting Sophie in daycare." "Okay," I said. What else was there to say? "This is your fault, you know. All of this. We were fine until you decided to be vindictive." The old me would have argued, would have defended myself, would have tried to make him understand. The new me, the one sitting in her own apartment drinking coffee from her favorite mug, just said, "If that's how you see it, Michael, don't you even care? Don't you care that your granddaughter is suffering because of your selfishness?" I closed my eyes, took a breath. Sophie is suffering because her parents spent 5 years living rent-free instead of saving for their own home. She's suffering because you and Emily chose to forge documents and lie and manipulate, rather than respect my boundaries. But no, Michael, I don't think she's suffering because I chose to keep my own house. Children are resilient. She'll be fine. "You've changed," he said, and his voice was cold now. "You're not the mother I knew." "You're right," I said softly. "I'm not. That mother let herself disappear to make you comfortable. This mother knows she matters too." He hung up on me. I sat looking at the phone, waiting for the guilt to crash over me, waiting for the old instinct to call him back and apologize and fix it. It didn't come. Instead, I finished my coffee, got dressed, and went to the park where I'd been walking every morning. The trees were full of new leaves, that impossibly bright green of spring. Birds sang in the branches. An older couple walked past holding hands and they smiled at me. I smiled back. I sat on a bench under an oak tree and I thought about my life. About David and the decades we'd had together. About Michael when he was small, before entitlement and selfishness had hardened him into someone I barely recognized. About Sophie and how much I'd loved being her grandmother. About all the versions of Olivia I'd been: daughter, wife, mother, caregiver, martyr. And I thought about who I might be now, in this new chapter I'd fought so hard to begin. Not defined by who needed me or who I was sacrificing for. Just Olivia, with clay under her fingernails and books to read and a small apartment that was entirely, completely mine. The sun was warm on my face. Somewhere a child laughed. Life was happening all around me, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt like I was part of it rather than just watching from the sidelines waiting to be needed. I pulled out my phone and texted Martha. "Dinner tonight? My treat. I want to celebrate." "Celebrate what?" she texted back. I thought about it for a moment. Then I typed, "Being alive." 6 months later, I was sitting at my kitchen table on a Saturday morning, working on a pottery piece I'd brought home from class, when someone knocked on my door. My first thought was that it was Martha. We'd fallen into a pattern of weekend breakfasts together, taking turns at each other's apartments. But when I opened the door, it was Michael standing there, looking older somehow, thinner, with shadows under his eyes I didn't remember seeing before. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just stood there, me in my clay-stained apron, him in a wrinkled shirt that hadn't been ironed, looking at each other across the chasm that had opened between us. "Can I come in?" he finally asked. I thought about saying no. I had that right now, the right to protect my peace, to guard my boundaries, to choose who got access to my space and my heart. But curiosity won out, or maybe it was the small remaining part of me that would always be his mother, no matter what had happened between us. "All right," I said, stepping back to let him in. He looked around my apartment, taking in the small space I'd made into a home. The bookshelves I'd filled with volumes I actually wanted to read. The pottery pieces on the windowsill, misshapen bowls and lopsided cups that weren't useful for much except reminding me that imperfection was allowed. The photographs on the walls, including new ones from the women's group picnic, from my library volunteer appreciation dinner, from the day Martha and I had driven to the coast just because we could. "It's nice," Michael said quietly. "Smaller than I expected, but nice." "It's perfect for me," I said. I didn't offer him coffee, didn't ask him to sit, just waited to hear why he'd come. He cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. "Emily and I separated 2 months ago. She moved back to her parents' place in Ohio and took Sophie with her." Something twisted in my chest at that. Sophie gone to another state, even farther from me now than before. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. Whatever else had happened, I hadn't wanted his marriage to fail. "Are you?" His voice had an edge. "You got what you wanted. We lost everything." "I didn't want this, Michael. I wanted basic respect in the home I provided. That's all I ever wanted." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "We couldn't afford the place on our own, you know? Not even close. We'd been living above our means for years because we didn't have to pay rent. When we had to start paying for everything ourselves, rent, utilities, daycare, everything, we couldn't make it work. We fought about money constantly. Emily blamed me for losing the house. I blamed her for pushing you too far. It all just fell apart." I could see the pain in his face, the genuine bewilderment of someone who'd thought things would always work out and was discovering they didn't. Part of me wanted to comfort him, to tell him it would be okay, to slip back into the role of mother who fixed everything. But a stronger part of me, the part I'd built over these past 6 months, stayed quiet and let him sit with his consequences. "Why are you here, Michael?" I asked gently. He sat down uninvited on my small couch, his shoulders slumping. "I don't know. To apologize, maybe. To see if we can fix this somehow. You're my mother. You're the only family I have left now, and I." His voice cracked. "I miss you. I miss having you in my life." The old me would have melted at those words. Would have gathered him in my arms and told him of course we could fix it. Of course I forgave him. Of course everything would go back to normal. But I wasn't that woman anymore. That woman had been used up and tossed aside. And I'd worked too hard to become someone new to go backward now. "I miss you too," I said honestly. "I miss the son you used to be, before entitlement made you cruel. I miss my granddaughter every single day. But Michael, I can't go back to who I was. I won't. I'm not asking you to." He looked up at me and I could see he was crying now. "I know I messed up. We both did, Emily and me. We took advantage of you. We treated you like a servant instead of like family. And then when you stood up for yourself, we tried to destroy you rather than admit we were wrong." He wiped his eyes roughly. "I've had a lot of time to think about it. About what kind of person I became. What kind of person could forge their own mother's signature, could try to have her declared incompetent, could accuse her of theft from her own house. What kind of person could do that?" I asked quietly. "Someone who was raised to believe the world owed him everything," Michael said. "Someone who took and never thought about what he was taking from. Someone who loved having a mother more than he loved his mother, if that makes sense." Did make sense. In a sad, horrible way, it made perfect sense. "I'm seeing a therapist now," he continued. "Twice a week. We talk about entitlement, about family dynamics, about how I learned to take without giving back. It's hard, Mom. Really hard, looking at yourself clearly and not liking what you see." "I know," I said. "I've been doing the same thing. Looking at myself, at how I enabled you, how I made myself small to make you feel big, how I thought love meant endless sacrifice without boundaries." We sat in silence for a while. Outside my window, I could hear children playing in the courtyard, their laughter floating up through the autumn air. Life continuing, moving forward, indifferent to our complicated history. "I can't give you what you had before," I finally said. "I can't be the mother who gives up everything and asks nothing in return. That woman almost disappeared completely, Michael, and I barely saved her." "I know. And I can't pretend the past 6 months didn't happen. You hurt me in ways I'm still processing. You and Emily tried to take everything from me. Not just the house, but my dignity, my competence, my right to make my own choices. I know, he said again, his voice barely a whisper. So if we're going to rebuild anything, and I'm not saying we will, but if we're going to try, it has to be something completely different. Something equal. Something where my boundaries matter as much as your needs. Michael nodded slowly. I don't know if I know how to do that, but I want to learn. I want to try. I looked at my son, this man I'd carried and birthed and raised, who'd broken my heart so thoroughly I'd thought it might never heal. And I felt something soften in me just slightly. Not forgiveness yet, that would take time, maybe years, maybe forever. But the possibility of forgiveness. The space where healing might eventually grow if we both did the work. I volunteer at the library on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, I said. There's a cafe across the street. Maybe you could meet me there sometime. For coffee. Just talking. No expectations beyond that. I'd like that, Michael said. I'd really like that. He left a few minutes later, and I stood at my window watching him walk to his car. An older sedan, not the new SUV he'd been driving when they lived in my house. I watched him get in, sit for a moment with his head bowed, then drive away. And I felt something I hadn't felt in relation to Michael in a very long time. I felt hope. Small, fragile, uncertain hope, but hope nonetheless. Martha came over that afternoon like we'd planned, bringing bagels and cream cheese and the gossip from her book club. I told her about Michael's visit, about the conversation we'd had, about my mixed feelings. Are you going to meet him for coffee? She asked. I think so. Maybe. I don't know yet. I spread cream cheese on a bagel, taking my time thinking. Is that weak of me? After everything he did. Weak. Martha shook her head firmly. Liv, you stood up to him when it mattered most. You didn't let him steamroll you or manipulate you, or guilt you into giving up everything you'd built. You held your boundaries like steel. Meeting him for coffee now on your terms in your time? That's not weakness. That's strength, choosing compassion. There's a difference. What if I'm making a mistake? Then you'll learn from it and adjust. But honey, you're not the same person who moved into that house 5 years ago. You know your worth now. You know how to walk away. That knowledge doesn't disappear just because you give him a chance to do better. She was right. I'd proven to myself that I could choose myself, could put my own well-being first, could survive without Michael's approval or presence in my life. That knowledge was armor now, protection I'd carry with me always. The pottery class had an exhibition coming up in November, showcasing student work from the past few months. Joan had encouraged me to submit a few pieces, and I'd finally agreed, choosing 3 bowls that had actually turned out reasonably well, not perfect but functional in mine. The night of the exhibition, I stood in the community center gallery surrounded by my classmates' work and felt a pride I couldn't remember experiencing in years. This is yours. A woman about my age was examining one of my bowls, a wide shallow piece I'd glazed in blues and greens that reminded me of the ocean. It is, I said. It's beautiful. Really beautiful. Do you sell your work? The idea hadn't even occurred to me. Oh, I'm just a beginner. These are some of my first pieces. Well, they're lovely. You have a gift. She smiled at me. I'm Sarah, by the way. I run the craft co-op downtown. We're always looking for local artists. We talked for 20 minutes about pottery and art, and the strange joy of creating something with your hands. She gave me her card, told me to contact her when I had more pieces finished, said the co-op would be honored to display my work. I walked home that night with her card in my pocket, and a feeling in my chest that I eventually identified as pride. Not pride in what I'd done for others, but pride in what I'd created for myself. I did meet Michael for coffee the following Tuesday. It was awkward at first, both of us careful with our words, testing the ground between us to see if it could hold weight. But we managed 30 minutes of conversation about safe topics, his new job, my pottery classes, the books I'd been reading. When it was time to go, he asked if we could do it again. Maybe, I said. Let me think about it. I made him wait 2 weeks before I agreed to another coffee date, and then another 2 weeks after that. I was teaching him, whether he realized it or not, that access to me was no longer automatic. That relationships required effort and respect and patience. That mothers were people too, with boundaries that deserved honoring. Slowly, carefully, we began to build something new. It didn't look like what we'd had before. It was more careful, more honest, more equal. Michael started therapy in earnest, working through the entitlement that had been programmed into him over decades. He apologized, not just once but repeatedly, as new layers of his behavior became clear to him. Some of those apologies I accepted. Some I just acknowledged, not ready to forgive yet, maybe never ready. He told me about Sophie, showing me pictures on his phone. She'd grown so much in 6 months, her baby roundness giving way to little girl angles. She was in preschool now, making friends, learning to write her name. Emily sent Michael regular updates and photos, and he shared them with me, understanding that my relationship with Sophie was another casualty of what he'd done, one that might never be fully repaired. She asks about you sometimes, he said one afternoon in December. Gamma, she calls you. She remembers. That hurt and healed in equal measure. Maybe someday, I said. When she's older. When everyone's had time to heal. Christmas came, my first truly alone since David died. Michael invited me to spend it with him, but I declined. Instead, I had dinner with Martha and her adult daughter's family, and then I went to my quiet apartment and read a book by my small Christmas tree, just a tabletop one with white lights, perfect in mine. It was peaceful. Lonely sometimes, but peaceful, and I was learning that peace was worth its weight in gold. The new year brought changes. The library offered me a paid part-time position, and I accepted gladly. Joan asked if I wanted to teach a beginner pottery class with her, and I said yes even though it terrified me. The women's group from church had become some of my closest friends, women who knew my whole story and loved me anyway, who celebrated my victories and held space for my grief. One February morning, I woke up and realized I'd gone an entire week without crying, without feeling that crushing weight of loss and betrayal, without wondering if I'd made the right choice in selling the house and breaking away. I just lived, worked at the library, made pottery, had coffee with Michael, laughed with Martha, attended my women's group, read books, taken walks, lived a life that was small and quiet and completely, entirely mine. I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, the one folding tiny socks in a kitchen where she wasn't wanted, hearing words that would shatter her world. That woman had been so afraid of being alone, of being unnecessary, of having nothing left to give and therefore no value. She'd believed her worth was measured entirely by her usefulness to others, that love meant erasing herself until there was nothing left but service. I wished I could go back and tell her what I knew now, that being alone and being lonely weren't the same thing, that usefulness and worth weren't synonyms, that love without respect was just exploitation with a prettier name, that it's never too late to choose yourself, to reclaim your dignity, to build a life that honors who you are instead of who others need you to be. But I couldn't go back. None of us can. We can only move forward, carrying our scars and our wisdom, building something new from the rubble of what broke. Michael and I would probably never have the relationship we once did. That was a loss I'd had to grieve, was still grieving some days. Sophie might grow up barely remembering me, seeing me as the grandmother who left rather than the grandmother who'd raised her. That hurt in ways I couldn't fully articulate. Emily would probably hate me forever, telling her version of the story where I was the villain and she and Michael were the victims. I'd had to make peace with that too. But I'd also gained things I never expected. A community of women who saw me as a whole person. Creative expression through pottery that fed my soul. Mornings where I woke up without dread. Evenings spent however I chose, without having to consider anyone else's preferences or schedules. The simple, profound freedom of taking up space without apologizing for it. I thought about David sometimes, wondered what he'd think of the woman I'd become. I like to imagine he'd be proud. That he'd see the strength it took to stand up to our son, to choose myself when every instinct screamed to keep sacrificing. That he'd understand that loving someone doesn't mean letting them destroy you, even when that someone is your own child. On a warm afternoon in March, almost a year after I'd sold the house, I was sitting on a bench in the park reading when a young woman sat down next to me. She had a baby in a stroller, maybe 6 months old, and she looked exhausted in that particular way new mothers do, running on love and caffeine and sheer determination. "Beautiful day," she said, and I agreed. We talked for a few minutes, the easy conversation of strangers sharing a sunny bench. She told me about her mother, who just moved in to help with the baby. "I'm so grateful," she said. I don't know what I'd do without her. She's given up so much to be here. I looked at this young mother so earnest and grateful, and I saw myself 30 years ago. I saw all the ways this could go right and all the ways it could go terribly wrong. And I thought carefully before I spoke. Just make sure you tell her that, I said gently. Tell her you appreciate her. Make sure she knows she's valued, not just useful. Make sure she has her own life outside of helping you with yours. The young woman looked at me. Really looked, and I could see her trying to puzzle out what I meant. Of course, she said. I would never take advantage. I'm sure you wouldn't mean to, I said. None of us mean to. But it happens anyway sometimes. Just pay attention. That's all. She nodded slowly, and I hoped she'd remember this conversation someday when it mattered. Hoped she'd check in with her mother, make sure the sacrifice wasn't costing more than either of them could afford to pay. When I got home that evening, there was a message on my phone from Michael. Mom, I got a promotion. I wanted you to know. And I wanted to say thank you for not giving up on me completely, for still meeting me for coffee even though I don't deserve it. I'm trying to be better. I'm really trying. I listened to the message twice, heard the genuine emotion in his voice, the growth he was working toward. And I felt that soft, fragile hope grow a little stronger. We might make it, Michael and I. Not back to where we were, but forward to somewhere new. Or we might not. Either way, I'd be okay. I'd learned the hardest lesson a mother can learn. That you can love your child completely and still choose yourself. That sacrifice isn't infinite, that boundaries aren't betrayal, that walking away from exploitation isn't abandonment. It's survival. I'd learned that I deserved a life, not just an existence at the margins of other people's lives. That 63 wasn't too old to start over, to discover new passions, to build new connections, to finally become the person I was meant to be all along. The house I sold was just bricks and wood and memories that had turned sour. What I gained was so much more. My dignity, my autonomy, my self-respect, my future. I gained mornings that were mine and evenings that were peaceful and a small apartment that felt more like home than that big house ever did. Sometimes people ask me if I regret it. If I wish I'd handled things differently, tried harder to make it work, sacrificed a little more to keep my family together. And I tell them the truth. I regret that it came to that. I regret that my son and daughter-in-law valued my labor more than my personhood. I regret the years I spent making myself small. I regret that Sophie lost her grandmother because her parents couldn't see me as anything but a resource to exploit. But I don't regret leaving. I don't regret selling that house. I don't regret choosing myself when everyone else had chosen themselves at my expense. Because doing that, standing up, speaking out, walking away, that saved my life. Not in a dramatic, immediate way, but in the slow, steady way that matters most. It saved my sense of self, my mental health, my ability to look in the mirror and recognize the woman looking back. I'm 64 now, and I'm learning to be Olivia for the first time in decades. Not David's wife, though I was proud to be that. Not Michael's mother, though I'll carry that role forever. Just Olivia. Just me. And it turns out that's enough. It turns out I'm enough, all on my own, exactly as I am. That's the story I wanted to tell you. Not because it's easy or comfortable or has the neat, happy ending everyone wants, but because it's true and maybe someone out there needs to hear it. Needs to know that it's never too late to choose yourself. That love doesn't require self-destruction. That you can survive losing people you thought you couldn't live without. That peace, real peace, is worth fighting for even when the fight costs you everything you thought mattered. The sun is setting outside my window now, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. I have pottery class tonight, and coffee with Martha in the morning, and a whole life stretching ahead of me that's entirely beautifully mine. I don't know what tomorrow will bring, or next month, or next year. I don't know if Michael and I will fully reconcile or if I'll ever see Sophie again. But I know I'll face whatever comes as myself, whole, worthy, and finally free. And that, after everything, is more than enough.